Today's episode is sponsored by Holistic Goddess. You might have seen it going viral all over TikTok, but I'm telling you, this is one trend that actually lives up to the hype. Holistic Goddess just launched their new organic castor oil and frankincense blend. And if you care about your skin, your health, and your overall glow, you're going to want to pay attention. Castor oil on its own is packed with moisturizing and anti-inflammatory properties. It's been a healing staple for centuries. Frankincense essential oil, it's been called liquid gold for skin, helping with cell regeneration, reducing fine lines, and calming inflammation. But together, they're a powerhouse. This combo doesn't just hydrate your skin, it soothes it, it rejuvenates it, and it revives it. Plus, the natural aromatherapy benefits of frankincense help calm your mind while you're treating your body. It's skincare that feels like self-care, and you deserve that. Holistic Goddess's roller bottle makes it insanely easy to add to your daily routine. Whether it's part of your morning ritual, your nighttime wind down, or that 5 minutes you steal in the middle of a crazy day. This is pure, organic, no filler healing, exactly the way nature intended. You can check it out at holisticgoddess.com and use code UNDERSTOOD for 15% off. That's Holistic Goddess's castor oil and frankincense blend, ancient wisdom made modern at holisticgoddess.com. Welcome back to Misunderstood. I'm your host, Rachel Yucatel. There are moments in life when the path you're meant to follow doesn't announce itself with flashing lights. Sometimes it shows up quietly in the passions you choose when no one's looking, in the things you love so deeply you can't help but share them. My guest today, Patrick Hinds, is someone who turned that passion into something extraordinary. What began as a side hobby, a love for storytelling, for true crime, for human connection, grew into a global phenomenon. Today, Patrick is the creator and co-host of True Crime Obsessed, the widely popular podcast where true crime meets humor and heart, and the host of the Golden Girls Deep Dive podcast, a hilarious celebration of everyone's favorite Miami foursome. Patrick didn't just build 2 hit shows, but he built a movement. So much so that at one time he hosted the #1 show on Patreon, a rare achievement that allowed him to quit his day job and build a life around the things he loves most. But for Patrick, success isn't measured in downloads or dollars. It's measured in family. It's measured in love. It's the life he's built outside the microphone as a devoted husband and as the proud father of an incredible daughter whom he and his husband fostered from birth and later adopted. Today, their daughter is 11 years old, and their family story is one of hope, resilience, and redefining what it means to belong. Of course, we dive deep into the world of true crime, breaking down the cases that have captured our imaginations, the stories we can't stop thinking about, the ones that make us question everything. And because Patrick knows better than anyone how to balance the heavy with the hilarious, we also get to talk about the timeless magic of the Golden Girls. This episode is about trusting your passions, building the life you want, and never underestimating where a simple idea and a lot of heart can take you. I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. And by the way, if you are still contemplating whether or not to start a podcast, he gives you all sorts of ideas and tips to make that happen. So here's my talk with the brilliant, hilarious, and endlessly inspiring Patrick Hinds. Hey there, Patrick. I'm so excited to have you on Misunderstood.
Thank you for having me. I'm so thrilled to talk to you.
Me too. So in doing all this research on you, I found you completely fascinating and funny. And I found that there were times that I was listening to you or watching you and I just sort of burst out of laughter, which is kind of rare for me. So I am really excited to have you here and hear all about what you do.
Thank you. The pressure's on. I'm going to make you laugh. That's my goal for the time we're together.
Okay, perfect. So before we get into like what you do now and all your podcasting, I kind of want to know like, what was your upbringing? How did you get into this? What did you want to be when you were younger? Did you ever think you would be in this position? You know, that kind of stuff.
You know, I think now that I'm 47 and I can really and I've been in deep therapy for years, I can sort of understand my childhood. And I think that I just wanted to entertain people. And when I was a kid, I really wanted to be an actor. I wanted to be like a Broadway actor. And I tried my hardest, but God love me. I just had no talent. I was not good at it. I grew up on Cape Cod. I did all the community theater. I went to Emerson College where I tried to get into their musical theater program. I was not accepted. I took as many acting classes as they would let me. And then one day just sort of had the epiphany that like, all right, this is not going to happen. This is not for me. I sort of got into radio a little bit in college, and then I just wanted to move to New York. I figured like my destiny, my future was in New York City. And I moved, and for years and years I did, the service industry jobs. I was a bartender for like 15 years. I was a concierge for many years at a hotel, at the W Hotel. And truly, I discovered podcasting as and I liked listening to them, and it was kind of a new thing. And I had a really long commute to work, and I was listening to this theater podcast where this guy was interviewing these like famous Broadway stars, and he just stopped making it. And I was like, well, someone's got to do this, and nobody did. And that was when I was like, I'm going to learn how to make a podcast, and I'm going to do it. And that was kind of how I started podcasting.
So was that the first one you did, interviewing Broadway stars?
Yeah, it was called Theater People, and I was one of the very first theater podcasters, and I literally like had a suitcase full of sound equipment that I was learning how to use that I would drag around the theater district and sort of beg actors to talk to me, and we'd get a room at like one of the rehearsal studios, so you'd hear like piano in the background in another room and somebody singing, and I'd be interviewing like, some famous Broadway
That's so
actor.
cool.
It was very scrappy. It was really, the one thing I will say about myself is I'm a very hard worker. And when I get my teeth into something, I become obsessed with it. And I became obsessed with how the podcast sounded and booking booking cool guests and asking the right questions. My research was crazy. I knew everything about them when they walked into the room. And on top of that, I had a new baby and a full-time job and a husband. And, luckily I have an incredibly supportive husband who's like, no, go do this,
Right.
So yeah, that was how I started. My first podcast was a theater podcast that I made for a lot of years called Theater People Podcast.
And wait, so how are you making money at that moment? Like, did you actually quit your job to do this?
No. At that point, I was still bartending. I just transitioned from bartending to being a hotel concierge because I had a new baby and I wanted to be home. I wanted like more regular hours. And so that's why I was working a full-time 40-hour work week and raising a kid and doing this podcast on the side.
Oh my God. So to you, did you ever think that would be the moneymaker, or were you like, this is just a hobby?
I knew the theater podcast would not be, but I became obsessed with the podcast industry. And this was early-ish days in podcasting where I was really paying attention to who was doing what and what kind of, like, I was seeing creators transitioning from being like, there was a true crime podcaster named Bob Ruff that I followed who was a firefighter. And he transitioned from being a firefighter into being a full-time podcaster because his show was so good and his followers believed in him, and it just worked. And so when I made the decision that I really wanted to see if I could possibly transition into being a podcaster full time, I knew it was going to be a true crime podcast. And I just happened to have met this woman named Jillian Pensavalle who also wanted to make a true crime podcast. And we started making True Crime Obsessed in my living room, and within 6 months, it was so successful that both of us quit our jobs. And then like another 6 months after that, we were growing and growing so fast that my husband quit his job to come and manage us because we had need for that kind of thing. It truly felt like it happened overnight.
Wow. Okay, wait, sidebar. Let's talk about the baby and the husband for a second.
Yeah. Oh, please.
So tell me how that came about. Like at what age was this happening? And this started as a foster, right?
Yeah. So my husband and I met in 2010. I always get this wrong. We've been together for 17 years. So I think we met in 2007, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised by a lesbian. So I had a proper lesbian introduction to our relationship where he moved in with me after like 2 dates. I think he moved in. And we were just in love. It was just kind of amazing. And in the beginning, we did not want kids. That was one of the reasons we wanted to be together. We used to say we were going to have fancy vacations and name them. And then it changed. Like something happened where one day we woke up and we were like, oh shit, we want kids, or a kid at least.
Mm-hmm.
And we were doing fine financially, but like traditional adoption or surrogacy was just out of bounds. Like, $70,000 for traditional adoption or $130,000 at the time for surrogacy. We just couldn't afford that. And so I was on the subway one day and I saw a poster that said like foster to adopt. And I was like, what is that all about? And I looked into it, and that was the avenue we pursued. So, I mean, at that point, we were 34 when we started the process and 36 when our daughter came to us.
Wow. Okay. And was she the first and only that you've ever fostered?
Yeah. Yeah, she came to us. We when we were my sister who has kids was saying like, what are you going to do if this baby comes to you and you raise this baby for a while and then you can't keep her? And I was like,
Yeah.
I think we'll be okay. Like I think, we want to be a part of the process and a part of the system. The second I met my daughter, I was like, oh no. Oh God. Like if this child is ever, I don't know the purpose of foster care is reunification. That's how it should be. But there are
Right.
instances where that is not possible. And that's when adoption becomes an option. And that was our story.
Right. And in this program you were using, was it only foster to adopt, or it was the same thing, whereas
No.
unification was the goal?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to say intentionally misleading, but like we definitely went into it thinking that there were two tracks of foster care.
Sure.
One is traditional foster care with the idea of reunification, and one was, babies that had already been cleared for adoption or maybe abandoned, which happens more frequently than people I think know. But no, that wasn't the case. It was, we went in saying that our intention was to adopt and to find to be matched with a baby that had a high likelihood of being cleared for adoption. But Daisy's adoption didn't happen for 2.5 years. Yeah, I mean, it was a really long process.
It's interesting. I had a guy on almost a year ago. His name is Mark Daly. He wrote a book called Safe, and I don't know if you're familiar with it. He
No.
is a gay couple that were married, and they were fostering. I think it's two kids now that he's had, and how much he wanted to try to help the parents come back into the picture, and it just kept being a terrible situation. And eventually, they did get reunified, and something happened, and the kids had to come
Uh,
back to him. And now he has adopted both. He and his husband. They're making a movie out of the book. Yeah, I
wow.
got to send you the book because it's
Oh, please do.
fantastic. And he is such a great guy. But he does talk about how difficult it was as a gay man having to be part of that process for him. It was a difficult situation. And I guess, it was fascinating, his story, and it was incredible to
I'll
listen
say
to
that.
now how great these kids' lives are, and his as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we were lucky that we were doing it in New York City, and everybody entering into the system in New York City has to sign a pledge that there'll be an affirming home. So they take the LGBTQ side of this very seriously.
Mm.
Our what was hard for us was that Daisy came to us right from the hospital, 6 days old.
Oh, wow.
But like as a foster parent, you really are a babysitter. You have no legal rights. If we wanted to get her a haircut, we had to get it cleared through the agency, which would get it cleared through the birth parents.
Oh,
And I mean, it was like, I mean, at one point towards the end, when it was clear that the adoption was going to happen, we went to visit my family in Massachusetts, and you have to get anytime you're leaving the state, that has to be cleared. And we forgot to get it cleared. And I remember we were sitting at my mom's house. I'm like, we are like technically kidnapping our daughter right now. So
I,
foster care has its challenges for
it
sure.
does. It does. I'm curious, what was that moment that you realized that adoption was going to be in your future for her?
There wasn't one particular moment, but it became clearer and clearer as we were going through the process that her birth parents just weren't going to be able to get her. Like they just weren't. They just it was. Reunification was not going to happen,
Okay.
and that became clear. I would say probably 6 to 8 months in.
Okay.
But then, the courts do everything they can to give birth parents every option to do it, to do the things they need to do to be reunified. So that's why the process takes so long. But I will remember, I mean, the adoption day when we went to the courthouse, Daisy's birth mother actually showed up, and because it was going to be like a termination of the parental rights in conjunction with the ceremony of us becoming the adoptive parents, and we saw her and we didn't really know what was going to happen, but it turned out that she was there because she wanted. This is the part that always makes me cry, but she wanted to say to the judge that she was willingly giving up her parental rights as long as the baby was coming to Steve and me. She
Oh,
wanted that to be part of the story, and it was such a beautiful moment.
has she stayed in your daughter's life?
No, I
No.
mean, once that happened, we haven't seen or heard from her since.
Wow. And then was there a moment where you explained to your daughter that she was now yours?
Well, she was very young at that point, and she didn't really know her birth parents at all. She'd only
Right.
ever seen them maybe once or twice, so she always felt like she was ours. But it was as she got older that she would ask about them from time to time, and
Mhm.
we always are, we tell her everything we know, which isn't a lot. So she knows everything that we know.
Right.
We always tell her that, her birth mom is very tall and her birth dad is very short but very handsome. And like, so like we don't know where she's gonna end on the tall or short spectrum. And so it's fun to be able to talk to her about that. But one thing that is very cool is that her older sister was adopted by another family years before, and we had the same social worker, and the social worker connected us. And so now they live in New York City, as do we. Daisy and her older sister have a relationship. They actually now go to the same school, so they
Stop.
see each
I
other all
love
the
that.
time. Yeah, it's a really, really beautiful thing.
Oh, good. I love that. Okay,
Yeah.
good. Well, I had to have that whole conversation because I was dying to know. That's
Yeah, I could
fantastic.
talk about it all day.
Yeah, I wish you guys all the best of luck with that. Okay. So
Thank
let's
you.
go back to your podcast. So then you started to get into, so was your next podcast the True Crime Obsessed one that you started?
Kind of. I had this idea that there was a thing called branded podcast, branded content way back in the day where like AT&T was like making a podcast. So I was like, I wanted to do that at first, and then I sort of put that aside and went whole hog into this true crime podcast with Jillian.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, we started out with this idea that we were going to do like a nerdy kind of like NPR style podcast that would have three segments where there'd be a true crime news segment, and then an interview segment, and then a segment where we talked about a true crime thing, either a documentary or a podcast. And we made this pilot, and when we were the thing we were talking about was this documentary called The Imposter. And I remember we both watched it separately and took notes on it, and then we sat down to sort of record our discussion about it. And it was not what I expected at all. Jillian was so funny, and we both were bringing a lot of like ideas to this. We were talking about the case and the documentary in this way where we were sort of cracking each other up about like how angry we were getting about, the dumb prosecutor and the whatever. And I remember when I was editing the episode, listening to it, being like, why are we laughing? We shouldn't be laughing. You can't do funny and true crime. But then I was listening to it and I was like, wait a second. We're laughing at our rage. We're like, it's very victim focused. We're very focused on like telling the story correctly, but we're mad at the documentary and we're mad at the DA and and I was like, this doesn't sound like anything else that's out there. Like,
Mm,
and even then, this was 2017, there was oversaturation in the true crime content, podcast market. But
yeah.
I was like, this is really different. And I remember calling Jillian and being like, I think this is the podcast. I think that like, forget the other two segments. I think we should just do this. And she's like, all right, if that's what you think. And we put it out there, and I gotta tell you, like, it just hit. Like it just, I came from the theater podcasting world where I was used to getting like 2,000 downloads or something for my episodes, and
Mhm.
and from day one of TCO, we were getting tens of thousands of downloads per episode, and it was just growing and growing, and we were seeing this community very quickly coming up around the people. Somebody created a Facebook group which now has like 60,000 members in it, and people just wanted more and more and more, and it was so, it happened so fast, it put me in therapy. I went through a phase where I didn't know if the world was real. I'm like, how is it possible that I'm quitting my job and doing this like dream job with this amazing person? And my life changed completely in what felt like overnight.
Oh my God, I love it. All right. So there are so many people that are dying to start a podcast, don't know how, don't know what the way to do it is. So, like, let's pick your brain for a little bit.
Yeah, please.
So, did you feel, first of all, were you part of a network or you guys were just putting this out on
No,
your own?
no, totally independent. We did it completely on our own.
Okay, which is what I am too, which I believe in. But anyway,
Yeah,
that's a whole other story.
same. Oh, same, same.
So when you guys started, did you feel like, first of all, what you already talked about was very important. You found your niche, you found your sweet spot, you found what made you comfortable. You weren't playing to any specific audience and it just worked. You started to put it out. How often do you think is important and what is the sweet spot of putting things out?
So weekly is kind of the standard.
Mhm.
You know, we did get an ad deal very early on with a company called Audio Boom, and in getting a deal like that for us meant getting on a schedule. They wanted us to make, I think, 46 episodes per year. I think what I have found to be really helpful, that's a good number. If you want to make a weekly podcast, I think that is, and weekly podcasts, I think tend to be the things that are the most successful.
Mhm.
I think 46 episodes is good. I would say, but put something in your podcast feed every week, whether it's a rerun or it's maybe you do like a Q&A with with listeners or whatever. Never let your feed be dark. That's kind
Mhm.
of, the algorithms matter. And if your feed goes dark for a week, it can mess things up. And, people, especially as you're building a following, I think it's important to stay consistent.
And how do you feel like you grew your following and your downloads? I mean, were you doing marketing? Was it just people word of mouth?
I became obsessed with this. So like that was part of it, was that I was like a dog with a bone, as they say.
Mhm.
I was learning marketing. I didn't know anything about it. I was staying up at night, and we had no money. So we were looking at, like, in the beginning, we were paying like $25 a week to market on Facebook. And I was learning, watching YouTube videos about how to market and how to target ads and how to make ads. And I was also working really hard to make relationships in the community. So I was reaching out to other podcasters. And one of the best things you can do as a podcaster if you don't have an ad budget is do promo swaps with other podcasts that are about the same size as yours. So, we were reaching out to back then we were still small, we were reaching out to other small podcasts and saying, like, hey, I'll run a 60-second promo at the top of my show for yours if you'll do the same for me. That is really helpful, especially in the true crime space where people just want more, 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 more,
Mhm.
So it doesn't take away from your downloads to promote another show as long as they're doing it for you. And then, I have always said, I think this is still true, that podcast audiences are built one listener at a time. That, if you're lucky enough to have an audience that wants to engage with you, you have to engage back.
Right.
And being consistent. I think when we started the Facebook group, that was amazing because it was a place to go and engage with our listeners. When on days that we didn't have a new episode, asking people to, do iTunes reviews, asking people to tell their friends about the show. All of that stuff really works.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there are people that always are asking me about Patreon. And if,
Yes.
there are some podcasters that just do Patreon and don't do the regular unpaid stuff. So can you
Yeah.
explain that whole world and the difference?
Yeah.
And if you have to have one versus both?
Well, I'll just to say, I know of what I speak here because for many, many years, TCO was the number one creator on Patreon. Not the number one podcast creator, but the number one creator. We had the most patrons of anybody else on the
Incredible.
platform. Yeah, thank you. For us, we did it because people were asking for it, and making our episodes it was very time consuming. At the time, I was editing all of our episodes, and before I was able to quit my job, it was like two full-time jobs at once, in addition to parenting and the whole thing. So it was hard, but once we dove in, what we realized was, at the time, most content creators were doing one bonus episode a month for $5 a month. And oftentimes they weren't as good. They were sort of like, it's our Patreon content. It doesn't have to be as well edited. It doesn't have to necessarily be as long or as interesting. And I went to Jillian and said, I think we need to make 4 episodes a month for $5 a month and do one a week, make them as good and as long. It's the exact same thing, just on Patreon. She was completely into it.
Mhm.
We were very lucky in the sense that our podcast, TCO, we recap true crime documentaries. So on our regular feed, we were doing the one-off 90-minute documentaries. But suddenly Netflix was coming out with these like multi-part series that we were kind of like, how do we cover these? We don't. So that's when we realized we would do that on Patreon. So we would
Mm.
cover, like The Keepers was one of the first ones we did. That was like 6 episodes. And we did all 6 episodes, in a row on Patreon. And that was our content. So for me, a successful Patreon goes above and beyond what successful creators are already doing. Like,
Right.
there's no question that there really is a lot of work to it. And then it's, keeping the quality the same as you already have it on your regular feed, and asking your listeners to support you. I think that, like, it's okay to say to your listeners, hey, we love doing this. You want this to exist. Come and support us on Patreon. I mean, the mistakes that creators make on Patreon is overcommitting. So I don't think there's any reason. I think a good Patreon is, tier number 1 is $5 and it's bonus content. Tier number 2 is $10 and it's ad-free content. I don't think you need to do anything more than that. You start to see these creators who are like, and then we'll have a $25 tier where we're doing this and this and then the creators themselves can't keep up with it. Patreon doesn't really offer customer service. You have to do all of your own customer service on Patreon. We
Mm-hmm.
have, at this point, we have like almost 40,000 patrons. So imagine, how many customer service questions we're getting about, I can't get my Patreon. Like, there's just a lot to consider with Patreon. So
Wow.
start small, keep it consistent, but make it really good and ask your listeners to support you.
And as a monetization thing for you, do you feel like you're making more money on your ads from your show or from your Patreon?
I would say with the ebb and flow of the ad industry, like, we're probably making more money on Patreon now than we are on ads. There was a time when that wasn't the case when, not to bore your listeners with like behind the scenes stuff
No,
about
I
how
think they're
ad.
interested in that. I get these questions all the time.
Yeah, there was a time when the ad market was really strong where, they advertise the ad companies will sell ads based on what's called a CPM. So it's like basically per thousand downloads. So let's say your podcast has 50,000 downloads, right? They're gonna sell an ad at $25 per thousand downloads. And there was a time when that CPM was $45 per thousand downloads. And then there were times that it's like $15 per. It just ebbs and flows. And Patreon is consistent. It's always your $5 tier and your whatever your other tiers are. You know how many patrons you have. You know what you can count on.
Right. And with the ad, you're at the whim, the beck and call of if your listeners are really buying and do they
Yep.
want to extend and, all sorts of things. So you don't really ever know, when that's coming in. You get those accounts, you get those for a certain amount of time. And then, with the Patreon, it's more straightforward.
Yeah. I mean, I always say that if you can get like 3,000 listeners to pay $5 a month, that's $15,000 a month. You
Yeah.
know, I mean, that's an incredible amount of money. Like, that's a living for sure,
Yeah.
And I always tell small creators, like, TCO, True Crime Obsessed, is a commercial podcast, no question about it, right? Like, but there are smaller shows that, I think it's perfectly valid to say, we're not big enough to get ads, but we want to make this and you want it. Can you throw us $5 a month in exchange for this amount of bonus content? And everyone wins. I think it's perfectly fine to tell your listeners what you need.
Right. Okay. Now you also have another podcast about the Golden
Yes.
Girls. How did that
Yeah.
even come about?
Well, it's called the Golden Girls Deep Dive Podcast. We just yesterday found out that we won a Webby Award. I've never won a Webby Award
Oh,
before.
congratulations.
Thank you. It's kind of a really big deal to us. We're really, really, really excited. I always wanted to make a Golden Girls recap podcast, but I wanted to do not just your traditional recap. So we call it the Golden Girls Deep Dive because in addition to recapping the episodes, we will also do deep dives into, like, we have a full-time researcher on staff. So we'll do deep dives into the episodes, into the world of the Golden Girls, into like the cultural references that they make in each episode. There's lots of that mixed in throughout. And so I just was at a point where I wanted more. I'm one of those like more people. It
Yeah.
makes my husband crazy.
Mhm.
And I have this wonderful, brilliant friend named Jennifer Simard, who's a two-time Tony Award nominee. She's currently starring in Death Becomes Her on Broadway. And she was amazing, and we'd been wanting to work together. And one day I was like, I'm ready to make this podcast. Do you want to do it with me? And she was like, yeah, let's do it. And so we started, and it's really fun to start something from scratch and start to build a whole new community. And because it's not a true crime podcast, many of these people that we're finding that are our listeners have no idea about True Crime Obsessed. They just love the Golden Girls, and
Right.
it's really fun to be building this new community.
What do you think it is about the Golden Girls that they've had this enduring success? Everything that you see on those shows is still funny. It's
I
still
know.
relevant. They were so
Yeah.
ahead of their time.
It's a good question. It's something I think about a lot. I think it's just incredible writing, right? I think it like if minus the outfits, the costumes, you could put that show on today. Like, you could take those scripts, not all of them. There are definitely some jokes that you would never say on TV today.
Right.
But other than that, the themes are sort of timeless. It's like chosen family. It's people who just sort of love each other, who are go have their ups and downs, and it's incredibly well acted. It's incredibly well written. There's just something about it that is so comforting. It is such a comfort show. And I think, when I meet listeners, it's like everybody, it makes them think of their mom or their grandma,
Right.
and like who doesn't have a fond, or I guess I should say everybody who's lucky enough to have fond memories of their mothers and grandmothers. I think it really is. It just feels wholesome but edgy and fun and kind of sexy and silly, and it's got all of the elements.
What's weird about it is that when you watch it, even when I was younger and I watched it, I always thought these women were really old.
Oh yeah.
They're like in their 40s or 50s in this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
They're
we
my
did
age.
I know. We did like my co-host Jen is 53 and she's like the age that Blanche is on the
Yeah.
and like yeah, and she's so youthful. I think that B. Arthur was 60. I think Betty White was like 58. Stell Getty was in her late 50s and Rue McClanahan I think was 50. And
Right.
right, we thought of them as like old ladies,
Right. I
in a
think that
way that
was a
we
lot
just
of their hairdo and
yeah,
the costumes like you're talking about and the way they decorated
100%.
their home. They look like they live in Boca, in the
Yeah.
80s or whatever.
And yeah, it's also like, like other than Blanche, like none of them go out. They're just kind of homebodies and, they're volunteering or whatever. But yeah, I mean, in a way that like it does not ring. That's another thing that does not ring true.
Right. I have a question from my friend Tim. He wants to know if you were a golden girl, which one would you be?
Oh, Tim, this is a very sensitive question for me because I always thought of myself as a Dorothy, but my husband and everybody in my life tells me that I'm a Rose. And which is I hate because she's like the one I like the least. But I am kind of a silly dummy, so I guess I kind of am the Rose.
That's so funny. All right. And I know you have a story you talk about on your tour where you met what's her name?
Yeah, B.
B.
Arthur.
Arthur. That's right.
So
What happened?
I'm doing this tour. I'm doing 40 cities. Come and see me. It's a very funny
I
night.
looked at your list. I want to see if I can get to one of them.
Yeah, where do you live? Where are you based
I
out
live
of?
in Palm Beach, Florida.
Oh, I'm coming
But
to Orlando. I mean, if you can come, I'd love to have
yeah,
you.
I'm going to talk to you about it because I definitely want to come.
Oh, that'd be amazing. Yeah. So essentially, what happened was when I gave up on my acting dream in college, I didn't know what to do with myself. So I got an internship on a morning radio show in Massachusetts called the Maddie in the Morning Show, which is like a famous show. And I
Uh,
thought I was going to be around famous people all the time. And then it turned out that like the famous people that were on the show were like phone interviews. But I had like lied to my friends and said that I was meeting all these famous people. And so when it was announced that B. Arthur was coming to my college to get an award, they're like, well, you're around famous people all the time. Like, you should be her host for the weekend. And I, of course, was like obsessed with her.
right.
And essentially what happened is I went to like meet her at the airport and she just hated me on sight. And it was one of those things where I wanted her to like me so bad. I was so
Oh.
desperate for her like love and attention that like she's the kind of person that just makes crazy. And so everything
So
I
she was like,
said,
get away from me.
get away from me, gay boy. Like it was one of those things where I just wanted her to love me and everything I did made it worse. And I just could not get myself out of the spiral of just trying to get her to like me. So the story is essentially the story of my show that I'm doing. It's a mashup of my daughter coming to us and the night that I spent with B. Arthur, because it's me at home waiting for the baby to be delivered, watching the Golden Girls, and then remembering that like, oh my God, there was only one other time in my life that I was like this scared and this nervous, and B. Arthur was there for that too. So I go back and forth between the two stories.
Right.
Sort
And then
of,
I heard, I mean, it obviously made that big of an impact that now on tour you have like an impersonator, right?
yeah, so Jason B. Schmidt is this amazing B. Arthur impersonator. And so he's not with me in the room, but what we did was we recorded him as B. Arthur and all. So we've got these beautifully edited videos of me of B. Arthur and then me live sort of interacting with her
I
while
see.
she's returned from beyond the grave to tell her side of the story.
I love it. I love it. All
Yeah.
right, let's get into the true crime that you are obsessed with.
Oh yeah.
What cases are you currently obsessed with?
Well, there's the one that stays with me like always, which is there was the case of a woman named Dr. Sneha Ann Phillip, who went missing on September 10th, 2001. And she was a doctor who lived with her husband across the street from the World Trade Center, like literally right across the street.
Mm-hmm.
And she was going through a really hard time, and they were kind of going through a hard time together. And she had family that lived in her neighborhood. So, like, a lot of times she would go out at night and not come home. Like, she would either stay with her brother or with friends. And so, when she didn't come home on the evening of September 10th, it wasn't necessarily that unusual because she would do that. But then she never came home again. She vanished. And the last images of her were taken at a department store right across the street from the World Trade Center at about, I want to say it was like 5 o'clock on September 10th. You see her buying some buying some I think she was buying shoes or something. And then she vanishes into thin air, and nobody knows what happened to her.
And
And
of course, as we all know, September 11th, the World
was the
Trade
next
Center.
day.
Yeah.
And it happened right across the street from her apartment. And so, she was a doctor. And the question is, like, did she stay with a friend that night? And she was coming home maybe that morning and saw what happened and maybe ran into the towers to help people and died there? Or did something nefarious happen to her on the 10th? Or the other option is, like, was she so unhappy in her life that she saw the tragedy of September 11th as the opportunity to sort of run off and start this, like, new existence?
And it's remained something that nobody knows.
No, nobody knows. And this journalist, John Walzak, did a whole like nine episode podcast about it. And the conclusion that he comes to essentially is that it would have been one of the things that happened was that in her apartment building on the morning of September 10th, there is an image of a person coming in the front door of the building and waiting by the elevator. Now, the way the light was coming in that day, you can't really see who it is or what they're even wearing.
Mm-hmm.
But this person came in what would have been maybe 1 or 2 minutes before the plane hit the building across the street. And so at the time when the plane would have hit, you see this person turn and walk out. Now, that would lend the idea that, like, this was her and she was running out to see what happened. Remember, we saw her buying, she had big bags in the department store the night before. This person was not carrying bags. So if it was her, then where did the bags go? Or maybe it wasn't her at all. But anyway, this reporter basically, the other thing that happened too was that in 18 months after September 11th, there was a big thing on the internet back in the early 2000s called Post Secret, where you could write a postcard into this P.O. box and tell a secret that nobody knew. And this person who ran that account got an index card, and on it said, "Everybody who knew me before 9/11 thinks I'm dead." And so the question was, like, did that come from her? But the conclusion that this reporter came to was that it would have been impossible for her to run into the towers and not have been stopped. By the time she would have been there, there was already EMS directing healthcare workers where to go. So somebody would have seen her and remembered her,
Right.
and would not have allowed her into the towers anyway. So that probably didn't happen. The likelihood that she was murdered on September 10th is extremely low.
Why?
Well, that has to do with, like, statistics about, like, the number of, like, homicides that happen. And, it's kind of a numbers-y thing that the homicides are just very rare. And also, like, homicides in New York City, like, bodies almost are always found, So, like, what would this person have been able to do with her body?
Well, unless it was, in this area where obviously there was so much going on, you couldn't tell if it was a murdered body or not. But wait, did you say she was married?
She was married, yes.
And what's the story with the husband?
So the husband was working overnight, so he wasn't there. But when he came home, their apartment was full of dust. And there was no footprints. So she clearly had not been there overnight. His name is Ron. I can't think of Ron Lieberman.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Hold on. Time out. When you say filled with dust from what happened in September 11th?
Yeah. Their windows had been blown out and there was, like, dust all over their apartment
Okay. And when you say there was no footprints, she didn't come in after that had happened, but could she have been there before?
Right. No, we know she wasn't there the night before. We know she didn't come home. Wait, how do we know that? I can't remember how we know that, but we know that she didn't come home the night before. But
he wasn't ever a suspect. Is that what happened?
He was a suspect quickly, but then cleared. So
Okay.
we know where he was. He was at another hospital, he wasn't there. And then the idea that she like ran away to start a new life, it's almost impossible to do that.
Right.
And
And why? She was a doctor. If they had
well,
no problems.
right. Well, they were having marriage problems. She
Okay.
was definitely dealing with like alcohol abuse disorder. She had not her internship as a doctor had not been renewed. Like she basically got fired. She was
Oh,
definitely having trouble in her life. Is it possible that she went somewhere and killed herself and nobody found the body? I mean, that is a possibility. She is officially listed as a victim of the September 11th attacks. A judge did
really?
order. That's what her family wanted. A judge ordered it. And she is. If you go to the 9/11 memorial, her name is on one of the tribute walls.
So, I mean, listen, not to start rumors here, but that's a very interesting thing because, people that died in September 11th, their families were awarded a lot of money.
And
So,
she was not eligible for that because
oh, okay, good.
what happened was that the judge initially said yes, and then it was overturned. And then by the time the overturning was overturned, it was too late for the family to be able to collect any money.
Got it. Because I
And
would have just said that could have been a reason for,
totally. Yeah,
Okay.
and I will say they're still identifying remains at Ground Zero. They're still like every day like working on. There's the family's given DNA. They're hoping that someday there'll be a match, but I just don't think that that's what happened. I just don't. But I don't know what I think happened.
Right.
It's. Yeah, it's
It's a
one of those weird
mystery.
flukes. Yeah. And these two happen. I mean, I've been making this true crime podcast for 9 years now, and I can say that like these flukes where people do just vanish and with no trace of them ever to be found ever again, it does happen.
Right. Okay, that's very interesting. Let's break
Yeah.
down a case together. Is there a case that you are following right now that you are into, like the Karen Reed
I
case,
was just
or
gonna say I'm
yeah?
very into the Karen Reed case.
Okay,
Yeah.
we had Turtle Boy on. Do you know who he is?
Oh, of course.
So
Yeah.
we had him on. It was one of our best episodes. He literally broke the whole thing down for us. And Turtle Boy is a journalist, for people listening
Yeah.
that don't know, who very much believes that Karen Reed is innocent. So much so that he's gotten himself in a lot of trouble and arrested and
He
made.
started the movement. He started the
Yeah,
whole Free Karen Reed
he
movement.
really did. So what is your 2 cents on the Karen Reed trial?
Well, I think it is absolutely absurd to think that she cracked her tail light with John's head. That is
Mhm.
absolutely insane to me. The thing that like I think is so crazy here that does not get enough coverage is like all of these people were so hammered. I don't think any of them remember anything. They
Right.
were all drinking and driving. The one thing that we know is that John had a cocktail glass from the restaurant. And I think that's what cracked I think they were fighting. He got out of the car. He threw the cocktail glass at the car. That's the thing that cracked the tail light. Did she like back into him and then that's why he ended up in the snow? I think that's possible. I think if she did do that, she had absolutely no idea that she did it. I think
Mhm.
if that's what happened, I think that it was an absolute accident. I
Mhm.
don't think that there's a world in which he went into this house and they murdered him. That like sounds banana pants crazy to
But
me.
how do you think he got all the marks on him then?
Well, right. Well, I mean, I do, we know from covering like a lot of cases. For example, the West Memphis 3 case where those boys were
Yeah.
killed in the woods. Like there was there's marks like that on their bodies and people were saying this was evidence of a satanic ritual that they were tortured. And then it took like one expert to be like those are animal bites. Those are like
Right.
animal marks. And I think that's possible. I just like I don't I guess what I can say, and we're about to start covering this case on True Crime Obsessed, so I'm gonna
Mhm.
like I will have a lot deeper thoughts in a couple of weeks, but
Yeah.
I I think it's possible that she hit him by accident. I think there's no world in which I think she did that on purpose. I think she has no idea. I think that she has no idea what happened that night. I think she was drunk out of her mind.
Right.
And I think the other thing that we know is that there's no way 5 people are going to be able to keep a secret. Somebody's going to talk. Somebody's going to have
Right.
a crisis of conscience. If he went into that house and all of those people know that he was murdered in that house, somebody's going to spill the beans at some point.
I
There's just
agree. I
no
agree with
way.
that. I also agree. Listen, I find it very interesting that everyone was so wasted. These are a
Yeah.
bunch of people you do not want to hang out with, by the way. They all seem
No.
toxic,
Yes.
animalistic. Like these people suck.
She
And
seems like the world's worst person.
right, right.
The
And the
only
other
one
thing
that
is,
wasn't awful was John. He was like raising his other people's children. Like he seemed like
yeah.
an amazing guy.
Right. And not for anything, Karen Reed is very unlikable. I mean, she's
Yes.
the way she handles herself, the way she's so all over her attorney. I don't know. There's
Yes.
something about her that you're just like, I don't really care because she sucks. And
Yeah.
she sounded terribly mean to John. And
Yes.
you know those relationships that are toxic and you got to get out of, but you just don't. And
Yep.
I agree with you. I think if she did hit him, I don't think she was backing up at 60 miles per hour
No.
just to hit him and leave him. She could have hit him by accident. But the damage to the car didn't make sense for what was on
Right.
his body or for killing him. I don't really follow what could have happened. I think that something could have happened inside that they didn't think he was, that I don't think anyone tried to kill him in there. Maybe he got into a
Yeah.
fight,
Yeah. That's
stumbled out,
possible.
fell, froze to death. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I think that everybody was so wasted they don't really know, and they all want to
And
blame someone else.
they're all cops. They're all cops drinking and driving. And this
And they're
restaurant.
probably covering up other things, yeah, as opposed
Totally.
to what happened.
And they're all right. They all just seem awful. And, I got to say, too, I'm from Massachusetts. I know, I don't know them, but I know people like them. Where I come from, they all talk exactly like them.
Yeah.
It's just, it's wild.
Do you have any predictions of how this new trial is going to go? I don't
I
think
think
she's going to have as easy a time this time.
I think it'll be a hung jury. I don't think you're going to find
Again?
12 people to convict. Yeah, because I think there will be people that are going to see it on both sides. I don't think there's any chance she'll get an acquittal, and I don't think there's any chance she'll get convicted. This is, to me, screams of a hung jury. I kind of don't even know why they're retrying it.
Right, right. Well, it'll be fascinating to see. The other one that
Yeah.
I've been obsessed with, there's two I'm going to bring up, but the Lori Vallow case. Did you follow that?
God, yes.
What
yes.
a psycho.
She's gotten crazier and crazier and crazier over time. Did
She
you
used
watch
to
the
be kind of
Dateline?
hot.
Oh yeah, she was totally hot. Did you see her when she was on Wheel of Fortune? She was on Wheel of Fortune in the 90s, and she was
No.
beautiful, and she looked kind of like you. And now she's watching this Jailhouse interview with Keith Morrison, where she's just
Oh my God.
singing and talking about how Jesus is literally comes and visits her in her jail cell and how he loves everybody, but she's his favorite. She says that her husband's murdered ex-wife, which they murdered the ex-wife, that her name is Tammy, and Tammy and Lori are great friends. Tammy from Beyond the Grave comes to visit Lori in prison, and they love it. She thinks she's going to get out of prison and go on Dancing with the Stars.
Right. Well, she's just nuts. I mean,
She's
this
insane.
woman is insane. But I used to follow this case before it kind of blew up. First of all, my favorite person in the world is Nancy Grace. Okay.
Oh.
So I'm obsessed with her. I find her funny. I used to watch, I stayed home every night at 7 or 8 o'clock, whatever it was, just to watch her. And I would always be like, God, I just love her. She's so angry. And I wish she would get a better, some hair extensions or something.
Yeah.
Because she was so harsh, but I just wanted to be her best friend.
We used to go to this. Kind of. We used to go to this convention a couple years ago, this true crime convention, and she was always there. But we had a booth next to each other one year, and I just remember she's a lot. She walks into a room and commands a space. She's a brassy lady.
Yeah, she's brassy. So I remember when this started, I found it fascinating because the husband died, then the brother died, and I remember listening to the 911 calls of the brother. He died on the toilet, by the way. I don't know if people remember this.
Her brother, Alex?
Alex Cox, yeah. And he was dating someone and she was there and the son of the woman came in and had to help. He was a terrible person, by the way.
Terrible.
Also, because he's the one that killed the ex-husband.
And he killed the kids.
Yeah. And the boyfriend was terrible. And everyone you talked to, they were like, well, this person's dead. This person's dead. And my daughter, who was so young at the time, was like, where's, is it
JJ and Tylee?
JJ and Tylee. And she would watch every night with me to find out if they had been found. Those poor grandparents that were like, where are my grandkids? And I couldn't understand why it was taking the cops so long to just grab them and be like, where are they? What is
Where are
going
they?
on?
I know, and it was they finally got the search warrant and they found them. They found JJ and Tylee buried on Chad Daybell's property, her new Lori's new husband,
Yeah,
and and they were able to pinpoint Alex, the brother's cell phone on the property the night the kids went. Like these
disgusting.
poor kids were like, it's just and like it's so
Did they ever figure
tragic.
out how they were killed? I think they were drugged or something, and then
Yeah, and like Lori has now this horrible, like not this like fake story that Tylee killed JJ and then killed herself. Like it's
oh god.
yes, I think they were drugged and strangled.
Oh my God, terrible. Well,
Yeah.
I think just yesterday she was found guilty again on the killing of the ex-husband, right?
She was representing herself in court, like, oh my God.
Yeah. So, and and now I think she has 2 life sentences, and
Yeah.
now she's actually it's not even done. She's going to trial again in July or something for a cousin's the death of the
Oh, right.
cousin's cousin or
Yes.
I don't even know who it is, but
Yes.
someone else.
Yes. Yeah.
So I just think that whole thing is crazy, and I'll be watching because I find it fascinating.
I know. I love you so much. I want to come to your house and watch it with you.
Yes. All right. So, oh, the other case that still haunts me that I want to bring up to you. Did you ever cover the Ellen Greenberg case?
Oh, that sounds so familiar.
Okay,
Remind
so
me?
she was the girl who was engaged. She lived with her fiance, and her fiance claimed that he came home. The door was bolted from the inside, which was an important piece of evidence. He came home. He had the guy downstairs. He went downstairs to get the doorman to help him. He didn't help him. He came upstairs. He broke into the house, and he found Ellen there, who had stabbed herself 20 times, and they ruled it a suicide. But
No.
everyone was convinced you cannot stab yourself 20 times in the
No.
kitchen and die. But he said the apartment was locked from within. No one had gotten access, so the police believed him. He ended up marrying somebody else very soon after. And the parents have been on a mission for years to try to get the case reopened. There was a lot of sort of rumor that the guy who was up for running for vice president with Kamala, and now I'm blanking on his
Tim
name,
Walz?
Shapiro.
Yeah.
Jeff,
Yes.
whatever.
Josh. Yeah.
He was the DA at the time, or I might be getting his title wrong, but the person who it was his responsibility to open or shut the case. They thought that it would be if he, got into the position where they had to dig into his past, they would find that there was some problems there because he was, I think, college friends with the parents of the fiance.
Oh, wow.
So all this very scandalous stuff going on. And I had someone on recently who was a podcast host that was obsessed with the story, that had been covering it for years, very close with the family. And another great episode people should listen to. But I think the parents are very close, if not haven't been since able to get the case to be looked at again by the court system. So I'm hoping
Wow.
that you guys look at that on your
Yeah.
show. You'll be
I mean,
fascinated and try to find out what happened to the fiance. I'm
you
convinced
would,
he's guilty.
of course. Like, I mean, I feel like it wouldn't be that hard to determine if stab wounds were self-inflicted or inflicted by somebody. Like, that has to look different.
Right, exactly. And I think there was some issue with the person and who's the guy that does the autopsy.
Oh, the coroner?
Yeah, the coroner. Like the autopsy report was changed a couple times. At first, it was homicide. They changed it to suicide. They can't get a hold of the person that did it. They changed it. I don't know, all sorts of weird things. So you guys should look into that.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm definitely looking into this.
Yeah. All right. So I heard Christy Teigen is a fan of yours.
Yeah, Chrissy is it's funny. It was funny because we were trying to get on Chrissy Teigen's radar for years and years. And we were working because she's a big true crime fan, and she at one point she made a tweet many, many years ago that was like, "Hey everyone, I promise you I gave that true crime podcast a chance. I just don't like the silly laughing." And she was definitely talking about me. And so I quote tweeted her and I was like, okay, but can we still be best friends? Like she didn't mention us by name, but I just knew she was talking about us. And like nothing happened. We never heard from her. And then one day, a couple of years later, Jillian and I were sitting in the booth that I'm in right now. And our social media person came running to the door and was like banging at the door. And we're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We thought somebody died. And she's like, on Instagram, you guys have a voice message from Chrissy Teigen. And it was her basically just saying that, like, she had gone through a really rough patch in her life where she lost her baby. And she was like letting us know that she was sitting in the bathtub and that we were the only thing making her laugh.
Oh.
And it was like the sweetest, sweetest thing. And we messaged her right back, and then she messaged us back, and then she's like, let's hop on a Zoom. And we got on a Zoom, and like her and John Legend are like just sitting in their house. John's like cooking in the background. This was high COVID time. And so we exchanged numbers, we got on like a text chat, and then like a week later, she was like, hey, if I come to New York, like, would you guys come over and like do an episode with me? And we're like, yeah. So this was
Let
before
me
they
think
even
about that.
I know. So this was before they even had like COVID tests. So that she hired a COVID like a scientist to come to her house. She flew in. Her and John and their entire family came to New York to their a house at their apartment in Soho. Had us over for the whole day.
You went
And
to their apartment?
yeah, they had us to their apartment and we hung out for hours and hours and hours. We recorded an episode with her. It was so incredibly fun. Then I was in LA a couple months later and I was like posting Instagram stories. And I was in downtown LA at the Cecil Hotel with my daughter. And Chrissy texted me and she's like, get your kid out of downtown LA and like come to my house right now. And I was like, really? And she's like, yeah. So we came over and it's always a party at Chrissy and John's house. Like there's just always a million people around. And, you know, an hour later, we're like drinking wine. We're in the pool. Chrissy's teaching my daughter how to swim. Chrissy Teigen taught my daughter how to swim in her pool.
Stop.
And then her and John were going to Mexico the next day. And she's like, I'll tell security that you guys can come use the pool as long as you guys are in town. So she like gave us the keys to her house. And
Did
we
you
like
go
came
back?
and, like, oh yeah, we went back like every day while we were in LA to like just hang out at Chrissy and John's house and swim in there.
Wait,
Like
is John,
cool.
I picture it that she's always in a robe looking gorgeous.
That is true.
And he's always sitting at the piano singing.
No, you know what? He's never done that for us. We've never
Okay.
had him sing. But I will say when we did our live show in LA a couple of years ago, they came and we were down in the green room before and John walked in first and he was holding 24 roses. One
Oh.
for me and one for Jillian. And he hands them to me and he goes, she didn't help me with this. And I was like, thank you, Johnny Legend. And our catering, because you know it was nothing, and we had like little bags of Cheetos. I remember being like, John Legend, can I interest you in a bag of Cheetos? And he's like, actually, yes. And he sat there and ate a little bag of Cheetos.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, you just
Yeah.
talked about your live episode, and I've seen this great video of you guys like doing the can or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Tell me
yeah.
about that.
So we were the first podcast to ever perform live on Broadway. We decided that we wanted to
Which
do
is, by
comedy.
the way, full circle because you said you wanted to always be on Broadway, which I
Yes,
love.
and believe me, it's funny because one of the slides I showed at that live show was from my yearbook. One of my senior pictures. Oh no, my senior quote from my yearbook was, "Give me 10 years and look for me on Broadway." And it took a little bit longer than 10 years, but I got there. And it was amazing. We hired a Broadway director and he hired these like 6 Broadway dancers and we had this opening number and a closing number and we did our live show in between. And it was just an absolute dream come true to be the first podcast ever to do a live show on Broadway.
I love that. All right. Well, what's next for you?
Well, right now I'm working on, I got my tour through August. You can get tickets and information at patricktours.com. Come and see me. And then I'm already working on my live show tour for 2026. We're putting that together. It's going to be it's a true murder mystery about there was a death that involved a very famous American family that no one has ever covered. I've never seen it on a podcast or a documentary. I'm getting the whole scoop, and I'm going to tell that story on my tour in 2026.
Love it.
I'm working on, oh my goodness, I just announced I'm leading a trip to Greece in July.
I saw that on your Instagram. Yeah, tell people about it.
So it's a company called Trova Trips asked me to sort of like do a trip to Greece. So they take care of the whole thing. They put the whole thing together. I'm kind of just the one bringing listeners together to do it. The tickets actually go on sale today. We pre-sold almost half. There's only 24 spots and they're almost all gone.
Wow.
But you can go to Trova Trips and just Google Greece with Patrick if you're interested in that. It's going to be
And
really,
fans
really fun.
can just travel around Greece with you?
Yeah, it's going to be 7 nights. It's 3 in Athens, 3 in Santorini. So it's 7 days, 6 nights. We're going to go to the island of Santorini. I'm so excited.
Have you ever been?
No, I've never
It's
been to the
amazing.
Greek islands.
I've been.
Have you been?
Yeah, I have. It's fantastic. You're going to have the best time.
Oh, good. And then lastly, I'm working on creating a new podcast in 2026, a new true crime storytelling podcast. So
Amazing.
just more.
Well, a little tidbit you don't know about me. I have my master's in forensic investigation. If you ever need me to come on and break down with you guys some fun case, please have me on.
Absolutely. Oh my God, we're doing that for sure.
Okay.
You have a master's in forensic investigation?
Yeah, don't ask. It was, something I always wanted to do. I've always been obsessed with anything true crime. I'm always hoping that someone will get shot in front of me so I could be the eyewitness or, all that kind of stuff. Or I could be on a hijacked plane and I could talk the guy down. I'm so into all that stuff. And for many years, all I watched was the ID network. I just, found it to be fascinating. And listen, it's always the wife. It's always the husband.
Oh, yeah.
Not that far off from always being those people. So my message is you got to be really careful who you fall in love with, date, marry, because that's usually the person that's going to kill you.
No question. I got so lucky. Thank the Lord. My husband's come close to killing me twice, but he's never gone through with it.
Okay. So we'll know if anything happens, it'll probably be him. Though.
Look at Steve.
Or your co-host on your show.
Yeah, exactly. Same story there. It is like a marriage,
Exactly. All right. Tell our listeners where they can find you and listen to your podcast.
So you can listen to True Crime Obsessed or the Golden Girls Deep Dive podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. You can, if you want to come to my live show, which I would love, just go to patricktours.com. And like all my information is on my Instagram. It's Patrick Hinds _ and that's HINDS.
Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm going to look at your list of places and see if I'm near any of them because I would love to come see you in person. And if I'm there, I will text you and we'll have a drink.
I would love that so much. And thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
Of course. Thank you. It was my honor. Thank you so much for listening to Misunderstood. I'm your host, Rachel Yucatel. Please be sure to subscribe to the show and give us a 5-star rating and review. You can support the show by joining our Patreon at patreon.com/misunderstood with Rachel Yucatel. Do you have ideas for the show or want to reach out? Email us at info_misunderstoodpodcast@gmail.com. That's spelled MISS understood. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.